Welcome, everybody, to the show. With me is Dan the Dancing Man. So I'd like to welcome everybody else to the show. Tonight we are talking about Gettysburg. Dave, hey, do we have a no enemies code for Noble Knight right now that works?
Yes, it's called something show. I forgot. Fuck.
Well, that's not helpful. I think there's one.
No enemy show. Oh my God, I forgot.
Oh, Jesus H. Christ. He's forgotten
I forgot. I got a new job.
Well, you got to look at it. Go look it up. Well, we start talking about Gettysburg. All right. So welcome, everybody, to Charles Latorre, Jason W., Mike Anthony, Jeff Beeler, Carl Crater from the War Game Boot Camp, William Bird, Stigler, and Fucko. Everybody is in the house tonight. We're going to start by talking about the very first historical board war game that actually tried, to whatever extent it was successful, to simulate an actual historical battle. This, of course, is what we call Gettysburg 58 from Avalon Hill. This is a Charles S. Roberts design. This design was redone at least three times, I think four times that I know about. We're going to look at three of them here. And this is interesting because, for one, it's on a square grid. Even when the second version switches to a hex grid, they're still referred to as squares in the rules, which is weird. If we back up and look at the counters, you'll see that these counters are genuinely atrocious. 1958, what do you want, right? At least they're, color appropriate without being pink or something like that, which was a thing that Avalon Hill was known for doing weird colors. Something weird is going on with the chat here.
I got the code. It's NEH show.
NEH show for 10% off your order at Noble Knight.
Yeah.
We'll put that in let me put that in the thing here.
Yeah, and you tell him Jess sent you.
NEH show.
Yeah. She's so nice. That girl is so nice. It's gross.
It's definitely great for putting up with us. I can't argue with that.
Seriously.
So here we have the second, what's called the second edition from 1961. And this is sometimes called Hex Gettysburg because it switched to a hex grid map. I don't have a picture of the map, at least for this particular one. But then later on in 64, another revision switched it back to a square grid again for reasons known only to God and Charles S. Roberts. But then they redid that in 1977, and this is the one that I'm actually a little more familiar with. This is what we call Gettysburg 77. It is essentially a ground-up redesign. You'll see that certainly the map looks quite different. Not exactly state-of-the-art pieces even for the time.
Did they change design? Did they not? I'm sure they didn't change designer, but did they change artist or?
Oh yeah, I mean clearly this is I don't know what this is. This is probably from the PBEM kit, actually. You can see that it's a completely different map. I don't have a copy of this to look. There's no artist listed here with this edition. And I don't think it's Charlie Kibler. I think Charlie would have been just a kid in 1977. But of course, this is one of the most popular topics for wargaming in general, and remains so. If you search for Gettysburg on BGG, for example, you get several hundred entries. So we're going to paw through a bunch of these here.
Hey, William from Kitchener, Ontario. Sup? How's those trucks?
Stigler says this map does look like Starship Troopers, and it probably is, in fact, the same artist. That's pretty believable. I'm under no illusions that this thing. So Gilbert Collins has done some videos on what I believe to be this version of the game. And it's probably got some issues, but it's probably not a total disaster either. Yes, this was done by an artist, anonymous artists collective.
That's ridiculous, man.
So possibly. Yeah. I don't know what's up with this, but I'm not seeing the latest comment on StreamYard. It's acting up.
What are you talking about?
So but you can't see it on your end. We'll talk about a most fearful sacrifice in a few minutes. So this is a question that I think has been asked a couple of times in a couple of different ways, and Stigler's kind of answered this as well. And I think somebody had Mark Herman on. It may even have been us when we talked about this. And Union victory in the Civil War is a little more complicated than, well, the Union won at Gettysburg, and Gettysburg was the decisive battle. Gettysburg was a decisive battle, but was it more decisive than the siege of Vicksburg, which concluded the following day and which cut the Confederacy effectively in half? Was it more decisive than the Union naval blockade that prevented European arms and money from coming into the Confederacy and Confederate cotton from going out to Europe? I'm not sure that it was. A string of Confederate defeats, and the Confederates still fought for another 2 years. So while it is a decisive battle, I don't think that's in question. And some of these battles too look a little less decisive when you look at them on the tactical level. Antietam's like that as well. After one of the reasons why Lincoln climbed up George Meade's ass after Gettysburg was because he was not satisfied with the pursuit of the Confederate army. And Meade, of course, the Army of the Potomac was pretty badly mauled at Gettysburg, right? It was not really in any position to mount a really effective pursuit as the Confederate army retreated back into.
70,000 people died, for God's sake.
Well, it's a lot of people. I mean, several of those Union corps were completely broken, for example. So
I look at Chim 812. He says Gettysburg is still the largest battle in the Western Hemisphere. I
think that's true. Yeah.
My God, what a massacre.
Yeah, so it was the largest, I mean, in terms of number of men, but don't forget, it's a 3-day battle, too. Antietam's really only a 1-day, kind of 2-day battle, but I'm not sure what's up with that.
How many people died?
So there's also a later edition that came out in the 80s that's later than this, which I don't have a picture of. And I think that was the S. Craig Taylor design that Ag Ray Day is referring to. And that's probably I mean, it's an S. Craig Taylor design, so it's probably really good. You know what I mean? Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. I'm sorry about this. We can't help you with this, Brant. I'm very sorry.
Brant!
Scott Bell says that Gettysburg 77 was his first Gettysburg game. The advanced rules, Gilbert Collins has talked about the advanced rules. The advanced rules specifically were kind of a mess. So, I mean, the Union Army, just as at Antietam, the Union Army claims victory because the Confederate Army withdraws. The Confederate Army leaves the Union Army in command of the field, and that's the basis of the Union claims for victory. Also at Antietam, the Union Army got beat up fairly badly and didn't really aggressively pursue the Confederate Army. So let's skip ahead to, I think, 1976 and SPI with one of the relatively, not the first, but one of the relatively early monster games, Terrible Swift Sword from SPI, designed by Richard Berg, of course. And this, of course, has a tremendous lineage. This sparked the Great Battles of the American Civil War series, which is a series that continues in a rather different incarnation to this day. It's a really interesting series. This is at this point, I believe Terrible Swift Sword to be a bit of an artifact, having been replaced by the much later 3 Days of Gettysburg from GMT. Now, there's 3 editions of this, and they're all a little bit different. This 3rd edition, which is the one I've got, for example, is noticeably different than the one. I'm not even going to show the TSR Terrible Swift Sword.
Artie, I got a question.
Yeah.
Have all the great battles of the American Civil War, has every single battle been simulated?
Oh, absolutely not.
Really?
No, absolutely not. I actually did a spreadsheet at one point of different Civil War series and the battles that they've simulated. And one of the series that comes up as having done a lot of battles that aren't covered elsewhere is actually a series we're going to get to, the Civil War Brigade series. I think this is probably an accurate statement, actually. If Lee's army marches into Washington, that's a different story, or Philadelphia, that's a different story. But, I think that's fairly unlikely. Jeff Beeler says he's indifferent to Gettysburg. This is essentially true, but you can make this claim about almost any battle. Does Antietam develop the way it develops if Lee's orders are not found wrapped around 3 cigars laying in a field somewhere? Maybe not. So, I mean, all of these things are a confluence of factors that resulted in things turning out exactly the way they did.
Hey, Kilroy, what's up? Yes, I'm subscribed to your show. I don't know to your channel. Please, people, subscribe to Kilroy or it's bad news.
So, oh yeah, I should mention that. So as of today, we now have an official, thanks to the viewers last night who suggested this, we now have an official Ardwulf's Lair recommended YouTube channels page. So if you go to the channel page and click on the channels tab, all the recommended channels will be listed there. It's a small list because I'm not going to maintain a list of 300 channels. And they're all active channels. They're all doing good stuff. Dan's on there, Players Aid's on there, all that stuff. So, I don't want to show the TSR map because I don't want to get demonetized. So, so back to Gettysburg. Moving on.
David Imperato.
David Imperato is in the house. Road to Gettysburg 2. Okay, so let's briefly talk about non-battle Gettysburg games. The other one here is Lee's Invincibles. This is from Worthington. This is something that's available right now. And of course, Roads to Gettysburg 2 is the latest Roads to Gettysburg game.
These are cover. Gorgeous.
It is. They're both really nice, actually, in terms of physical presentation. Although, of course, I'm a big fan of Great Campaigns, the American Civil War.
Those are expensive games, aren't they?
It is expensive, but there is a shitload of value in that box. So I don't think it's a cause for complaint. It is expensive, but it's worth every cent. I've gotten absolutely every penny out of that box already. Now, these are operational games, right? And if we look at this is, of course, several games put together. This is, I want to say just this box, though. This is the 4 maps in the Roads to Gettysburg 2 box. And you can kind of see that mountain ridge. And if you look at the map, you can't really see it so much in here. You could see why the battle takes place around Gettysburg, because it's a crossroads. All the roads in the entire region that Lee is in converge on Gettysburg. That's why the battle gets fought there. So I think it's a little bit of an oversimplification. We're having some autofocus problems here. Autofocus problems. I'm not sure what's up with that. It'll figure itself out eventually.
It's good.
This is why this is why the battle takes place where it does, not just because Jeb Stuart's off joyriding. That's a factor, and that's why Lee doesn't know that the entire Union Army is bearing down on him, but in all likelihood, the battle's going to take place somewhere in that vicinity anyway. So, yep, exactly right. What is forgotten in both Antietam's and Gettysburg Army, the Potomac had large surrender of troops prior to the battle. I'm not sure what John Stanley is referring to here. There's like some pre-battle stuff in the Gettysburg campaign where the Confederates do basically overrun some Union positions and take some prisoners and stuff like that. I think that's what he's referring to. See also Harper's Ferry. More than 3,000 horses were killed at Gettysburg.
God, it must have stunk, man.
Yeah, I would assume so. So, now, Lee's Invincible is a Matt Birchfield, Grant Wiley, Mike Wiley game. I don't know a lot about it. I do know that there's a couple games in this series, and it's kind of a point-to-point block style map. And there is also, I didn't pull it up in advance, but there's also Sam Grant and Bobby Lee from Columbia Games, which exist in a similar space. Although I think you could basically play out almost the entirety of the Civil War if you combine Sam Grant and Bobby Lee from Columbia Games. Reaching a little further afield, of course, we have Rachel Simmons' Guns of Gettysburg. This is kind of a legendary game here, and you can see I was looking at the going prices, which are actually pretty reasonable at the moment. But this is a very interesting game. First of all, because it's really nice looking, and secondly, because of the way that the movement works. It looks like a point-to-point map, but it's actually kind of if this makes any sense, and I don't know if I can properly explain this. It's kind of a line-to-line map. There are points on the map, but the pieces don't occupy the points. They occupy the lines between the points. And those lines are set up in such a way as to reflect the actual terrain. It's actually quite neat. I want to say that the pub battles games do something similar.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, of course, you've got these units that tell you, what the units are, and it makes for a very aesthetically pleasing effect on the table.
And who's the designer of that one?
Rachel Simmons.
Okay.
We've talked about 3 Days of Gettysburg. Then we got to move on to the Civil War Brigade series. Now, this was a big series as well. I think there were like 18 games in the series or something like that. It's a brigade-level Civil War series. One of the bigger ones, of course, because it's a big battle, is Thunder at the Crossroads, which is Gettysburg. And this is, I'll be honest, the map is a bit ghastly, but the game system is actually quite good. And you can see the scale here. It's not an enormous scale. I want to say this thing is like 2 maps or something like that. That sounds approximately correct. Yeah, it's 2 maps, 2 counter sheets. So it's a big game, but not like a super enormous game. But then they went and did the Regimental sub-series of the Civil War Brigade series, which takes the unit scale 1 step down. And this turns that 2-map game into a 5-map game. The map is a little less abrasive, and the pieces are about the same, as you can see. But these are Dean Essig designs. This is the kind of written orders system that Dean started with TCS, the Tactical Combat Series, and then later evolved into the Civil War Brigade series and the Napoleonic Brigade series, where you actually have to write your orders out. And then, of course, that's been carried out into line of battle.
Artie, what's John Longshore saying there? So the best game of Gettysburg was Terrible Swift Sword?
I'm not sure what John is referring to here, unless he's just saying that he thinks that Terrible Swift Sword was the best Gettysburg game, and he would not be alone in that feeling if that's the case. Now projected to be the new Kickstarter game coming out now. I'm not sure. Oh, so I can tell you that there's a big Gettysburg game coming from Adam Starkweather and Compass Games. That I can tell you. I don't think it's going to resemble Terrible Swift Sword all that much, to be honest.
How do you know this info, Artie?
Because I was at Compass Expo and Adam was talking about it.
There you go.
In this case. Mashing P doesn't have many ACW games, but looking at picking up one of the GCACW games as the system looks pretty fun. So I recommend all of them. The least suitable one for new players is Atlanta Is Ours right now. But even then, it's not, the individual scenarios, all of which are really good scenarios. You could have a very rich GCACW experience without necessarily playing the campaigns, the long campaigns. And then, some of the campaigns are pretty short. Some of the scenarios are pretty long. The one that gets my big recommendation is Roads to Gettysburg 2, because it contains the entire Gettysburg campaign, the entire Antietam campaign, a bunch of additional scenarios, plus the whole raid on Washington, Jubal Early's raid on Washington in 1864. So it's got just tons and tons and tons of material.
However, these battles are in sequence? Like, can you play all these battles in sequence?
Well, you could just play the whole campaign.
Okay,
yeah. So
okay.
yeah, I mean, you can play the whole campaign, but you're going to end up with battles that look different than they played historically if you play any of those scenarios or the campaigns, because one of the points of GCACW is that it's hard to bring all your forces to bear at exactly the right moment to crush the enemy. It's hard to pull off that decisive engagement. A lot of times you end up with something that looks a lot like Gettysburg, where all the different pieces are streaming in not an entirely organized way. And then, of course, this hallowed ground has been replaced by Last Chance for Victory in the Line of Battle series. This is kind of like a Regimental Sub-Series 2.0. This is the one that I have. This is a great series. It refines the rules quite a bit. It's easier to play than RSS is. And, of course, it's out of print and going for quite a large chunk of cabbage. So
$500, man.
Well, $275 for like new copies in the US. That's not that crazy. So to follow up with Mashing P here, I recommend Roads to Gettysburg 2, but it's like $200 or $180 or something like that. So go with Hood Strikes North instead. That'll give you a good introduction to the system. It's still a really meaty package. Jeff Beeler says all the Gettysburg games he owns are magazine games. So there's Fateful Lightning, there's Lee's Greatest Gamble, which I have the magazine and I have the map and the pieces, but I don't have the rules, which is a pain in the ass.
What about Mark Herman's latest game there?
We're going to get to that. In fact, is it next? It's next. Yeah. So this is a really, really compact Gettysburg game. And Mark said it's intended for new players, and that's sensible. This is pretty much the whole game right here. You don't get that many more pieces than this on this map. It's the same system as the later Waterloo game, but the Waterloo game is played on like a full-size map with about twice as many pieces.
This is I'll be honest, 11 by 17?
If that, yeah. I think it's I think it is 11 by 17, actually.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, it's really, really compact. It's a very elegant design. It did not speak to me where I am as a wargamer with what it is. It's just not, it wasn't for me, right? What the Waterloo game I thought was to me, it was more interesting because of scale. Yep. Last Chance for Victory. It's a really good purchase. It's a great game. And it's a beautiful package in terms of there's like 21 scenarios in it or something insane like that. There's mini map scenarios, 1 map scenarios, 1 day scenarios, 3 day scenarios, 4 map scenarios. I mean, whatever scale you want to play it out at, you want to play just the wheat field, there's a scenario for that. You want to play out the whole battle, there's scenarios for that. It's a wonderful package. There's some de-Nessing design decisions in there that lead some people to call it scripted. I think that's a little strong. I don't think it's scripted. Think of it as guided, especially on the first day, because if you don't provide a little bit of guidance to the way the battle's going to develop on the first day, then your second and third days are going to look nothing like the historical game. Scott Bell says Most Fearful Sacrifice should be in our hands before too long. I'm hearing an uptick in people talking about that, so I believe it to be pretty close. Little Round Top, the latest mini from Decision Games. Oh, okay. So I thought he was talking about Little Round Top from Avalon Hill, which was the game 20th Maine from OSG, and Avalon Hill redid it as Little Round Top, one of their mini games. I think this is the Rifle and Saber or Rifle and Bayonet or something like that series and the Decision mini series. And I know Stigler has an opinion on it. I was going to say, Sheriff, don't worry about it, man. Nobody hates here except Stigler. I don't have an opinion on this series. I can say that the minis and folios there's like a couple of series that run through those. And there's at least one of those series that I pretty aggressively disliked. That's the Fire and Movement series that's used in the more recent D-Day quad. The Civil War stuff, I'm not sure about. Maybe it's better. That's possible. Agray Day likes the Mark Herman C3I. Yeah, I'm not saying that's just a preference thing for me. It just did not speak to me.
Why, Artie, are you looking for more detail? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that is exactly it. Okay. There's like 18 pieces on the map total, and that's not gonna. I'm not gonna be satisfied by that. Is all I'm saying. It's not a game for me, and that's okay. Did I close the page for 3 Days of Gettysburg? So this is the first edition of what we call 3 Dog, and it is not going for huge piles of money. But if we then go back to the 3rd edition, the most recent one, we'll probably see that there's not even any for sale. My expectation is that this goes for upwards of $200 right now, unpunched. So it goes for a pretty good chunk of change. I thought I had Summer Storm pulled up. Let me pull it up. Summer Storm, I think I closed it because it's a Rick Barber map, right? And it's a really nice Rick Barber map at that.
I love Rick Barber maps.
And it's a hex map too, right? So I was looking at the time when I was looking these up before the show for area maps. And I know Rick did at least a couple area maps of Gettysburg, I think. Now there's also, Devil's Old Lady Place mentions Devil's Den. That is, if we're talking about the Avalon Hill Devil's Den, it's a little bigger in scope than just Little Round Top, but it is that part of the battle that covers Little Round Top and Devil's Den. So I want to try and not miss these here. Jeff Miller says he didn't like Lee's Greatest Gamble. It has been highly recommended by some people, but like I said, I can't comment on it since I don't have the rules. On the other hand, I paid like $2 for the game without the rules. Clash of Giants is kind of like a really, really strongly streamlined. No, it isn't. Never mind. That's Glory, is a kind of a strongly streamlined Richard Berg Great Battles system. Clash of Giants is the Ted Racer series, and there's 2 volumes of World War I and 1 of Civil War, and it does have Gettysburg in it. It's a pretty small treatment of Gettysburg, but it's not as small as the Mark Herman C3I Gettysburg. This should be coming. I mean, I don't have any inside information, Kilroy, about when exactly that's shipping, but I have noticed that there's a big spike in talk about it, so I do think it will be in people's hands pretty soon. We've also talked about Summer Storm at this point. Battle Hymn Volume 1. So I'm actually going to do something different here, and I'm going to pull up.
What are you pulling up, man?
Give me a second. I got to pull it on my... I'm pulling up Steam.
It's on Steam.
Sort of. Give me a second here.
There's something about computer games that piss me off.
Okay, so Gettysburg, The Tide Turns. Okay, this is from Shenandoah Studios. This is Battle Hymn Volume 1, except without P. Ridge. It's just Gettysburg. So if you want a computer version, and it's very pretty too. I actually have some video on this on the digital channel. It's very pretty. It plays very nicely. I'm very happy with this as a computer game. This is Battle Hymn Volume 1.
What does it go for?
Minus
on
P.
Steam.
$10 maybe, 15.
$10. That's it.
At the moment, $4.89 is what it goes for. So get it while it lasts. That price will be valid. Man. I didn't plan that out. My price, the price on this will be valid until March 7th. So if you want to try Battle Hymn from Compass, except you want to pay $4.89 for it, go get this on Steam. It's like I said, I've got it, I've played it, I've done video on it. It's pretty good. And of course, here is A Most Fearful Sacrifice. There's not a lot of pictures on this.
No, there isn't. Too bad, man.
But I've got a video on that, so if you want to see what it looks like, go check the video out. Jeff Beeler asks, which general's actions most affected the battle, and how is this reflected in the various game designs? So I haven't played every Gettysburg game, and I haven't even played all the games I've mentioned today. However, probably the general whose actions or inactions most affected the battle is Jeb Stuart. There's claims to be made in a couple of different cases. You could say Longstreet, you could say Dan Sickles, you could say Lee, maybe. I don't think you could say Harry Heath if you want, because Harry Heath started the whole thing. Nevertheless, I think that the biggest factor is Lee's, especially on the first 2 days, when he's got like no cavalry to his name. There is actually a little bit of Confederate cavalry available to him. It's just that most of the Confederate cavalry and all the best Confederate cavalry is off running around with Jeb Stuart. Those contribute to Lee's lack of information about what the hell is going on. Where is the Union Army? And I think if we look at you look at the battle on July 4th, 1863, then I think that looks like the most decisive thing that a general did to affect the battle. We have not covered Across 5 Aprils. Across 5 Aprils, let me pull that up. This is a Victory Games game.
Artie, before you get there, this Most Fearful Sacrifice, would you consider this a monster game?
No, I would not. There are people who would, and I'm not going to argue with them. But yeah, I mean, it's a big game. It's not only 2 maps, but they're big maps, right? I think you could play the whole thing in a weekend. And I think that's a little bit short of what I call a monster. But hey, I'm not the right person to give you an unbiased answer to that particular question. So this is an Eric Lee Smith game, and it's 5 battles. And here is a comparison. And this is said to be a progenitor of the Battle Hymn system, by the way. But I haven't played Across 5 Aprils. I have played the Battle Hymn in the computer format. The only difference I could find between the two, by the way, between the board game and the video game, are that in the video game you cannot dismount the cavalry, and in the board game you can. So Across 5 Aprils covers Bull Run, Pea Ridge, Shiloh, Gettysburg, and Bentonville. And I think that Battle Hymn Volume 2 is Shiloh and Bentonville. I think that might be correct. I'd be willing to be corrected on that. Kilroy just picked up the Clash of Giants Gettysburg game. In the mid-90s, a Gettysburg by Zeno games called Longstreet's Assault. This, of course, reminds me of Longstreet Attacks from Revolution Games and Herman Luttman. So this is Longstreet's Assault. I'm not sure I've ever actually seen this. I might have seen the box. There's not a lot of photographic evidence of this on BGG, however. This is a fair point, right? The fact that Richard Ewell has, probably over promoted at this point. So at Chancellorsville, Stonewall Jackson gets killed, and up to this point, the Army of Northern Virginia has been divided into 2 corps, both under really capable individuals, one under Stonewall Jackson, one under James Longstreet. After Jackson gets shot by his own men, the Lee decides he's got to do it differently and divides the Army of Northern Virginia into 3 corps, one under Longstreet, one under A.P. Hill, and one under Ewell. And then they go fight the Battle of Gettysburg, which did not really work out all that well. I think the Mark Herman Gettysburg game is pretty affordable. I think there's a box,
$35, man.
Yeah, I think there's a boxed version of that available directly from C3I. All right, so Scott Bell reports that we're talking about Most Fearful Sacrifice here, I'm sure, going to the distributor at this time. We've already covered that. Zombie Stonewall Jackson. I'm amazed that I haven't done that. Jeff, any regimental game, 20th Maine is a regiment, so any regimental game is going to have it as a distinct unit. So that means that Terrible Swift Sword will have it. All the different 3 Days of Gettysburgs will have it. Last Chance for Victory and This Hallowed Ground will have it. I want to say that Lee's Greatest Gamble is also regimental, so it should have it as well. And not sure how Guns of Gettysburg is actually. I'm not sure what its actual unit scale is. And Longstreet's, some would say, inaction in getting his force, bringing his forces to bear until Pickett's charge happens. You could say that that's decisive too, but Pickett's charge is really was kind of doomed based on the terrain, and it was a last desperate chance that did not pan out. More than a decisive, even possible attack. The Devils to Pay is the day 1 of Gettysburg, of course, in the Blind Sword series. Lyon, Nathaniel Lyon, obviously should be the opposite example on the Union side. You'd be surprised at how well William Aarons mentions this, and this is a legitimate question: is how do you balance scenarios that are not historically balanced? And the way that works in GCACW is the sides are more balanced than you think they are, looking at the force dispositions based on the relative command and efficiencies and limitations of the 2 armies. Hood Strikes North is a fairly competitive game, and bear in mind that there's scenarios that just cover individual engagements in that campaign too. You're not required to play the whole campaign, although that is a campaign that is very manageable. Hood invading Tennessee is also a last minute Hail Mary pass that did not pan out, by the way. So that's a completely reasonable question. CSA first day victory is possible in any decent simulation of the battle. This is something that a lot of Gettysburg designs struggle with if they're not designed by Dean Essig. Okay. This is why there is scripting in day 1 of Last Chance for Victory, so that you end up with a day 2 and a day 3 that look like the historical battle. Because if the Confederates can bring all their shit to bear, then yeah, they win an overwhelming victory, and that's absolutely possible. And a lot of games just do that, and you end up with a game that's just lopsided and no fun, right? So again, completely legitimate question. It's a design challenge for the Gettysburg designer. And games that model command efficiency do better at modeling this factor than games that don't. Dan, have you played a Gettysburg game? Great question.
Have I played a Gettysburg game? You know what? I don't remember, so I'm going to say no.
So
but
that sounds like
I'm waiting for a fearful sacrifice to come in. I want one of my friends to get into it, but this guy, he just wants to play Trivial Pursuit, and it just pisses me off.
I think that's going to be an easy game to play too. So and super pretty.
Come on.
Yeah, and I also really like, I like all these regimental Civil War series that we've talked about. The series anyway. I like Blind Swords. I like Great Battles. I like Line of Battle. I've never played RSS, but I'm happy to deal with the current version of it.
I just found out a way how to get my friend to play. I have to let him beat me so he thinks he's way better, and he's gonna, shit on me all the time. And I'll say, well, let's have another game.
That's a strategy that you can deploy. This is a completely legit factor that unfortunately is less useful than I'd like it to be. You can buy the computer game and it doesn't take up any shelf space.
Yeah.
Huge selling point.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking at this point that by July or June of 1863, that McClellan has no chance of being recalled to command of the Army of the Potomac at that point. Hooker staying in charge is possible, but remember, Hooker gets conked on the head at is it Chancellorsville? I think it's Chancellorsville. And is kind of addled but refuses to delegate to a second in command that didn't get hit in the head by a cannonball. So Jeff Beeler says Longstreet. We've addressed this already too. I think there's definitely a case to be made there. Martin Wallace did a Gettysburg game. Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, hold on. I think I got it, man. Yeah, I got it.
So None But Heroes, which is the line of battle Antietam game, which I have played, does have, it's kind of built into the system, right? It doesn't need really special rules to reflect McClellan's indecision. It's built into the game. You have to make a roll to get McClellan to issue an order, and then you have to make rolls to get the orders to be transmitted and accepted. So it's kind of built into the model. And McClellan's rating for doing that is low because he's a clown. So Hooker would have done a better job than who? Than Meade? I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure it's wrong, but I'm not.
Is McClellan a clown, or did he just get a bad rap?
McClellan, well, both of those things can actually be true. McClellan was a very good organizer. He was a very good administrative general. On the battlefield, he was indecisive and also plagued by bad information. So constantly in fear of mysterious, invisible Confederate armies outnumbering him.
Well, maybe he didn't want to sacrifice his men for nothing. You know?
Oh yeah, that's fine. And if you look at the like the Peninsula Campaign, and you look at what he does behave in a way that would have been prudent had he in fact been outnumbered by 2-1, but he wasn't. So we remember him as a clown. That is, if you're asking, is that a little unfair? It is. It is. But he also had the cojones to then go run for president against Lincoln in 1864 too.
You know, I'm perusing the Noble Knight website for Gettysburg games, and the 3 days of Gettysburg, the revised second edition, is going for $450.
Yeah, and I wouldn't get that edition. I'd get the third edition. That's a legit monster, though, right? That's not something you play in a weekend. We played it for several months, and we got through about midway into the second day. So yeah, that's a total monster.
Jesus.
But on the other hand, if you want a a more playably scaled game, maybe look at Thunder at the Crossroads, which is a very good game at the brigade level. Still, it probably would take a little longer than a weekend, but not too much longer. Well, Scott Bell on these 3 days, yeah, that's absolutely right. And remember, Meade had just been handed command. He shows up on the night of the first, and yet does generally make pretty good decisions. And sometimes his decisions are ignored by, say, Dan Sickles, but this is, well, Grant has to take some of the blame on this as well, actually, because Grant was the guy in charge. There's plenty of games on parts of Gettysburg, and we've mentioned a couple. The Devils to Pay, which is the first day with Buford and Heath. There's Longstreet Attacks, which is kind of that big assault on the Union's, I'd call it center, although left, right, center is a little weird in that particular battle. Hexy's in the house. Thanks for stopping by. So yeah, there's plenty of games that reflect just pieces of the battle. Little Round Top is another one. Devil's Den is another one. There's a long history of these. I'm just naming games that happen to be in print at the moment. And the Revolution games titles are generally very affordable. I'll mention that as well. I can see this. So Stigler's saying that all the little subsections of Gettysburg lose gravitas once you remove them from the context in which they take place in the whole of the battle. And I actually agree with that, but I also think, hey, sometimes it's fun to just play out the wheat field or whatever. So completely okay with that. I've actually heard good things about Sid Meier's Gettysburg, but I've never played it. Yeah, I pretty much said this already too. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, completely legitimate. I'm not really answering any zombie questions. So, well, this is a whole Confederate army. Yeah. By this time, well, so, I mean, there's a general lack of reconnaissance because actually I'll point you to the movie. Okay. Go watch Gettysburg, the movie. And you'll see a scene where Heath rides back to Lee and reports what's going on to Lee. And Lee tells Heath, obviously expecting Heath to understand, but Heath is kind of a dope, at least in the movie, and doesn't really get what Lee's telling him. Lee says, "I've heard nothing from General Stuart. Do you understand me, sir?" And he's telling Heath, not that I haven't heard from Jeb Stuart. He's telling Heath, I have no idea where the Union Army is. I have no idea what's ahead of me. I'm in an impossible decision space. And I really like that scene because I think Martin Sheen really kind of sells that, expecting, as Lee did sometimes, expecting his subordinate to understand what he was saying, and the guy didn't. Now, I'm not saying that exchange played out in exactly that way, but it's an example of that. Same thing with take that hill if practicable. And the general decided it wasn't practicable, so it didn't happen. And that may have cost them the battle. Some people think that it did. Bernadette at Auerstadt. No, because Ewell actually fought in the battle. Abraham Lincoln vampire. Yeah, we're not doing zombies. Say or decision. He's like Haster. He's like the Haster of decision games. Panzergruppe Hill. Yeah, kind of. And there's a lot of especially old Avalon Hill games, but SPI was guilty of this too, of like insufficient thought put into the modeling where cavalry basically behaved like panzers. Blind Swords is regimental, actually. That's why you don't get the whole Battle of Gettysburg and Longstreet Attacks. You only get part of it. However, the Most Fearful Sacrifice is not exactly Blind Swords, and it's kind of demi-brigades, if that makes any sense. There are a couple other games at that scale. It is a bit of an awkward scale. GBACW versus Line of Battle. So, Line of Battle is... the two systems are very comparable. Somebody, I think it was Nathan Wise Guy History, may have done a comparison video of the two. There are things I like about both systems, and overall I like both systems very much. I think line of battle is a bit easier to play in terms of the line of sight rules. But you also have the written orders, which is admittedly optional. I have long street attacks as well. It's optional, but I would never play without it, to be honest. There's also optional rules in GBACW, like the fatigue rules, I believe, or the ammunition rules are optional. I would never play without those. So Stigler's going to say GBACW, but I think both series are very good. I do say I like the counters better in GBACW, like way better. The maps I think are a little more even. I lean a little bit toward GBACW in the area of maps too, and the only reason for that is that I feel that there are too many elevation levels on the line of battle maps. It's just a bit irritating. I would like to do a comparison video of the two, but I need a blind swords expert to participate in that discussion. So, there's time to read both, John Longshore. Lee's Lieutenants, I've actually got that queued up. I have not read it yet, though. I don't think there's a whole episode of the Burns Civil War on Gettysburg, and I don't think, well, it's good. It's not really going to tell you much. You're better off just going to Netflix or Amazon and finding a random Gettysburg documentary, which they both have. Oh, well, yeah, we can't. I agree with Stigler on this. So, he did fail on the battlefield in many ways. Martian Wallace. So Martian Wallace has got to be the best Waterloo game, obviously. I wouldn't mind seeing, I don't know how much appetite in France there is to do American Civil War battles. But I actually do think that system might work pretty well adapted to American Civil War. I think that's an interesting idea. Yeah, it's not exactly brigade, though, if you start looking at the pieces. It's not exactly brigades. It's demi-brigades. Henry Thomas Harrison is known for... so this is... I'm not sure this guy shows up in the movie. Well, like I said, though, there is a Confederate sympathizer that does provide them with some information, and I think that is in the movie as well. But it's the crossroads in the area. There was going to be a convergence on Gettysburg, whether this guy spilled beans to them or not. I've heard this said sometimes, and I'm not convinced that this is actually true. If Sherman is crushed in a decisive battle in 1864, that might be the case. But the momentum is all on Sherman's side at this point. And the timing, while certainly helpful to Lincoln, I don't think was actually all that decisive one way or the other. Remember, the actual election result is a total landslide in favor of Lincoln. I don't think it was as close as people think it was.
Artie, where can I get an audiobook that gives me information like that? Because I had no idea that if Sherman didn't capture Atlanta, maybe McClellan would have been present. Can I get an audiobook that fills me in on stuff like this, man?
Look for an audiobook of James McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom. That's my preferred one-book general history of the U.S. Civil War.
So I'm going to get a lot of insight.
Yeah, I think so. It's a great book.
Okay.
You're also going to get a lot of, these are the causes of the Civil War. You're going to get a long prelude too, but you can skip that if you want. I think this is an overstatement based on a simplification, though. I am not convinced by this line of reasoning. Not that this is the first I've ever seen of it. So, hey, you're preaching to the choir here. Well, yeah, that's that's the problem McClellan has at Antietam, is that he has a numerical superiority that he never leverages because he believes he is outnumbered. And to some extent, this is Alan Pinkerton's fault, right? Pinkerton's funneling information to McClellan that is bullshit. So, that's just a thing that you got to take that into account too. It's complicated, right? It's always more complicated than then we'll fit in a tweet, right? So, well, supposedly Reynolds was asked first, and Reynolds said no. So there's also the frequent statement that Robert E. Lee was offered command of Union armies before the war, and there is not a shred of documentary evidence to prove that assertion. Maybe it happened, but there's not a shred of evidence to this could be the case. This could be the case, but this is also battles. The results of battles are the result of the confluence of a large number of factors. And just putting Joe Hooker in charge, who was very much let's go get him on the battlefield at Antietam, I don't think that necessarily equates to decisive Union victory. But I do think it results in Union victory and the Confederates saying, yeah, we're not going to fight this. We're not going to have this today, and leaving, which looks at the end like a Union victory. Probably a less costly Union victory than was actually gained under McClellan, actually. This is also true. We're kind of on topic, right? But Lee's legendary prowess as a field commander is also often overstated. He won a fair number of battles, some of which were brilliant victories, but some of those brilliant victories were not the result of Lee's brilliance, but of the erratic brilliance of Stonewall Jackson. And generally speaking, they were very costly to the Southern Army that could less easily afford to absorb those losses. So, I was looking at a game about Cemetery Hill, but there was the SPI Cemetery Hill, which is really kind of the whole battle, actually, not just Cemetery Hill. This is part of the army starts across. Well, no, it's back to the Potomac. Part of his army starts on the other side of Antietam Creek. That's part of the problem that McClellan has. Leveraging all of his forces, his forces are not well positioned to come into the battle. This is why Burnside's bridge was a big deal, because that's how they had to get to the battle. Lincoln's T-mails about Lincoln's use of the telegraph. That's interesting. I think this is a line from the movie. It's a good movie. I like the movie. I believe this is correct. Sid Meier's Civil War on Steam. I haven't really looked at that, I have to say. Coddington's The Gettysburg Campaign. That's an interesting choice. There's also Stephen W. Sears wrote a book on Gettysburg, which is highly readable. I haven't read Coddington, so I can't comment on that. Obviously, we'll have to check Coddington out here. Let me pull this back up. Is there more Gettysburg tabletop cardboard games than miniature game rules? Yeah, I'd say there are. But that's kind of an apples to oranges statement, right? Because a lot of miniatures rule sets get fiddled with extensively by whoever's playing them versus board game rules, where you just tend to kind of, if you've got to fiddle with them that much, you might as well go buy a different board game. So I think there are more tabletop games, more board games on Gettysburg than miniature rules. But then the miniatures rules, you can fight out whatever Civil War battle you want, right? So again, it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison. This is absolutely correct. Berthier, he was Napoleon's chief of staff, probably the greatest chief of staff of all time. Bradley Gottfried's Brigades of Gettysburg. That sounds interesting. Yeah, this, like I said, this is a most fearful sacrifice. It's demi brigades rather. That was a thing that I wanted to know until I got my hands on it, about exactly how it was, how the order of battle was laid out. It's basically demi brigades. Maps of Gettysburg. That's a really valuable book. This is Yeah, I'm not sure that this was said about Meade, though. Was it? Does Lee not know Meade, or is he talking about Grant when he says that? I'm not sure. And Grant is not yet in charge at the point of Gettysburg. William Aarons asked about Worthington Publishing's Hold the Line Civil War. So I've kind of glanced at Hold the Line, and it looks a lot like Commands and Colors to me, but I have Commands and Colors and don't need another Commands and Colors. So I don't mean it to sound dismissive when I say that I can't really tell you much about any Hold the Line game. So yeah, Most Fearful Sacrifice is called the Black Swan system. It is the slightly rescaled version of Blind Swords. Ohio was a Copperhead stronghold, actually. So not that that's the guy that we're talking about. Oh, absolutely. I just use McPherson because it's a good place to get started. There's plenty of additional resources. I mean, you could also go with Foote, but Foote is I don't think I can fit my commentary on Shelby Foote in the 4 minutes that we have. I've said it before, so there's nothing new here. Jeff Beeler asked, what were Lincoln's other alternatives to Meade, and was his choice of Meade a sign of Lincoln's military ability? So Lincoln was a lot of people in the Army really disliked Lincoln's micromanagement of the Army. This is allegedly why Reynolds said no, because he knew that Lincoln would be constantly micromanaging. So Lincoln's military ability was, I think, questionable, right? But on the other hand, it was a matter of finding the right guy. And the right guy turned out to be Meade, but that's also because then Grant emerges from the West and gets put in charge and is really the guy in charge of the Army of the Potomac once he comes over and kind of sits on top of Meade. There's other examples of poor Confederate leadership. Well, the obvious one is Braxton Bragg. There's I'm trying to remember what that guy's name was. The former preacher who gave up being a preacher to go serve in the Confederate Army. He was an example of somebody that maybe wasn't that good. This is essentially true. But again, it's where the crossroads is. It's where all the armies are going to converge. That's why it gets fought there. So this is completely true. This is true. This is especially true at the beginning and gradually becomes less and less true as the war goes on, right? The Union finds good leadership in various places. Until at the end, it has a decisive command advantage over the Confederates, whose command acumen kind of goes down a bit throughout much of the war after Lee takes command anyway.
So Gettysburg there was no strategic reason for that. It just, they met there and it's like, let's kill each other.
That's where all the roads lead to Gettysburg. That's why. There's a reason why the battle was fought there, and the reason is geography. Now, did there necessarily have to be a battle there? No, there could have been some a little meeting engagement and both armies withdraw. That's possible, but the terrain dictated the place at which the battle would take place.
Couldn't it have been circumvented somehow? For God's sake!
Oh, sure, I could come up with some contrived scenario in which no battle takes place. There have been entire books written on that subject. In fact.
Jesus.
Yeah. Get sensitive, John, but thanks. Why was Union leadership not as good as Southern leadership until 1864? Frankly, because of the Southern aristocracy. The South could afford to send their kids to military school because there's a lot of rich landed aristocracy down there. That's why a lot of those guys ended up fighting in the Confederate Army. And not that none of them fought in the Union Army, but the Union Army, both armies have their share of political appointees. Braxton Bragg is one of them. Dan Sickles is another one. There's plenty of examples on the Union side. There's less, but there's still some examples on the Confederate side. And that's a big Union problem too. This is true. Stonewall Jackson was very erratic. Sometimes he was brilliant and decisive, and sometimes he just went nuts. So flanks of Gettysburg, which is Little Round Top and Culp's Hill. Yeah, this is true. I haven't really looked at that particularly closely. I think Lee is a colonel at the. I mean, this is something that's often said, but I think Lee is a colonel at the point at which the Civil War breaks out. So, do I think he would eventually have ended up in command of something bigger? Sure, absolutely, because he was basically capable. But I don't think he would have just been instantly handed command of, a Union army right off the bat. And nor is there any evidence to suggest that was offered. Well, we've covered that already. Al Nafi, I'm not sure I've seen this. Al Nafi wrote a book on the Gettysburg campaign. That's pretty cool. Mostly the Mavens are in, positions of no. I mean, it kind of works out in the Victory Game Civil War, where you put the clowns like, whoever are the Union clowns, you put them in relatively unimportant positions, manning the garrison in St. Louis or something like that. So, Grant and Sherman, emerge at Shiloh, right? Although you could trace that lineage further back than that if you want. But they start to become decisive to the entire war instead of the particular theater that they are in 64. And I think that is what Stigler means here. All right. So we are pretty close to out of time.
This was fantastic. I mean, I'm just listening, absorbing stuff here, man.
Yeah, Robert E. Lee never fought a guerrilla campaign. I don't doubt that a U.S. president would have said something that stupid, but that strikes me as a pretty stupid statement. So I got to show all of you something.
This old man.
Look at this fucking thing. So I just had to show that.
And I don't know why that kills me. It kills me.
It's just funny. We're going to keep that there. Oh, awesome. Thank you, William Aarons. We should do this, actually. Jean-Michel Gros-Chou. We should totally do that. Wait, Dan, set that up. You speak French.
Yeah, you want me to correct your massacring of his name?
No. So this is a great idea, though. We actually should talk.
Okay, who is this guy?
Jean-Michel Gros-Chou. He has a YouTube channel.
Okay, you know what? Let me work on it.
Okay, you work on that. We will actually totally set that up.
Okay.
If possible. So bear in mind the time difference, right? Which I think he's in France. For all I know, he could be in friggin' Quebec. But I think it's, this is like the third week in a row where we've been pretty much on topic the entire time, actually, which is weird. But of course, we gotta go. So,
hey, this was great. I just absorbed this old man.
Look at this fucking thing.
Come on.
All right, everybody have a great night. Remember Dan's show at midnight on Saturday morning, and remember my show at 8 p.m. on Monday night.
Artie, you got to get me the info for this. You want me to correct the way you said his name?
No, I'm from Ohio. We don't care.
Okay, so get me this guy's info, man.
We'll see if we can wrestle him up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, man.